Okay. Hello and welcome to the Big 12 Mafia Show. I'm your host, Nathan Bomber Brown, and I've got Bronco. And say your last name for me, Bronco.
Bleymaier. It's a tough one.
Bleymaier. Excellent. I'm getting double. Hang on a second. Is that your audio? Is that my audio?
I hear you loud and clear.
Hmm. Something's going wrong here because I'm hearing myself talk. I don't have any other things open. Just give me 1 second. Technical difficulties and all that.
No problem at all.
Uh, no, I honestly do not know what's going on here. Something is open, and I apologize for those that are watching. I've got double audio here, and I'm trying to solve it. Maybe. Oh, there it is. I found it. That was me.
Oh,
So sometimes you have technical difficulties when you multitask like I do. I have 12 windows open, and sometimes it's carrying audio with that. So I apologize, Bronco.
no problem. That's how I watch college football. I have four different computers up during the season, and I have
Right.
each one, so I watch 12 to 14 games. I get
As long as we know that we're all working towards the same positive outcome, that's all that matters.
that. Absolutely.
So we got a couple of first ins. Cougar Tail has joined us, and I want to give him the first poster over throughout the day. And then David from Arizona he's the second poster. So thanks for being here, guys. We're going to be talking Mountain West, Boise State, and realignment today. Before we get started, I want to tell everybody if you're watching the show, take your phone, scan the QR code up in our upper right hand corner of our screen, and sign up for Coup Connect. That's BYU's NIL. It's only $10 a month. You get inside information, and really, it helps. It's going to help build the program. BYU wants to be big time. The only way we're going to do that is if we have a really strong NIL. The other thing I want to do is ask everybody to subscribe, follow Bronco and all my shows, and on Twitter, and certainly go to Bronco's show on YouTube. Let's tell me a little bit about your show, Bronco.
Yeah, well, the big news is that I just hit 1,000 subscribers today, so this is kind of a little bit of a celebration video. I'm
It
really
is fantastic. That's great.
It's a huge milestone. It's been a big grind. I started the show 4 years ago. I was doing pilot training and I was away from my family by myself for about 6 months. And it was right in the middle of COVID hit, and
Right.
gets canceled and we don't know what's going on. And I thought, there's no college football. I'm away from my family. Maybe I'll start a YouTube channel just so I can talk some college football. I got to get something.
Right.
I started the season. Obviously, the football season got reinstated, so I was able to preview and review games that year. And so I've been doing it for about 4 years now. I kind of do a lot of college football in general, but obviously it's a Boise State channel, so Boise State focus. But I also look at anything on the Mountain West, anything on the West Coast. I talk a lot of BYU, a lot of Pac-12, anything that conference realignment pops up. I'm always chipping something in, and it's been a fun journey so far. I'm excited for what's next.
That's fantastic. I'm just a pup compared to your show. I've been doing it 3 months, so I feel a little bit like overwhelmed hearing what your experience is. So in the future, if I have questions, I'll be probably coming to you.
Absolutely, it's been a fun start off just me making videos, and then I started
Right.
players and people associated with Boise State saying, "Hey, do you want to come on the channel?" They started saying yes, and I've started the heroes that I grew up watching and now coming on my show and talking about college football, and it's a dream come true. So I'm enjoying the process. I'm having fun with it. I'm excited to talk about what we're talking about today.
Well, that's fantastic, and I really appreciate you taking my invite. I think we're going to learn a lot about each other, but most importantly, we want to learn about Boise State, the current stance of where the Mountain West is, and the overall look at what realignment is for all over the rest of college football. Really quick, if you want to be part of the conversation, you're welcome to just leave a comment, but I generally get a lot of people in our shows, and so the comments come fast and furious. So if you really want to have your comment read, please feel free to do a super chat. That'll be highlighted to me, and every super chat is always read. And if you really want to give a little bit more, I have created 2 subscription tiers. One, again, shows all your comments will be read. The second tier is going to be, I'm going to be giving away a branded item. It'll be a towel that has my logo on it. I'll be sending that out as well. So if you're interested in those things, please go to my YouTube page and hit the join button. Okay, the very first question is, where is Mountain West legislation in relation to San Diego State right now?
Well, right now, I think they're posturing, just like San Diego State was. San Diego State puts out this message to the Mountain West saying, hey, we'd love to leave the conference a little bit earlier if we ever get an invite, and the Mountain West then responds with their own posturing saying, no, and by the way, we're going to take your request as officially leaving the conference, or as saying that you're going to leave the conference. So now your athletic director is suspended from our board, and you're not going to see any money coming from the conference until this is resolved. And that's a big deal because right now, Mountain West schools are about to receive a $6 million check the next couple of weeks, and part of that big drive that San Diego State did in the college basketball playoffs. So it's a double-edged sword there that they contributed the money, but you might not see it. But I think right now it's just posturing on both sides. The Mountain West, at the end of the day, it's why San Diego State's move, to a lot of people outside observers, it doesn't make sense. It's like they left a conference before they had a home. The is that the Mountain West doesn't have a lot of avenues to go with here. There's not a lot of great teams that can come and replace San Diego State. This isn't the American Athletic Conference where you've got multiple FBS high-level teams banging down your door on the East Coast that you can go pick up, and it doesn't really matter. With the Mountain West, because they're so geographically limited, and because, honestly, the conference has not done a great job of promoting itself or promoting its teams, it's fallen behind on the Group of Five conference curve, they don't options outside of San Diego State. Maybe they could go hit UTEP. Maybe they could go reach an FCS, but that's it. No one of San Diego State's caliber is easily replaceable. So at the end of the day, the Mountain West is going to have to cave in here. San Diego State decides we don't want to go to a Power 5 or are unable to get to a Power 5 and decides to come home. There's not a lot of leeway. The Mountain West will try to do their best to play the big game, but in the end, they're going to have to accept San Diego State back. They're probably not going to penalize them in any way. They're trying to create a precedent to prevent other teams from doing the same thing. But right now, San Diego State's got the helm, and there's nothing really the Mountain West can do.
So San Diego State has a track record with this, right? They did this again in 2010 with the Big East that existed and then ceased to exist within about 3 weeks. And so they kind of they do think they're big time, right? They think that they are, which is remarkable to me because Boise State is the better football brand by far, and football drives the bus. So I always thought that Boise State would be the ones that would be driving the organization, but because of basketball, and they do have a reasonably competent athletic program, I can understand what you're saying. Just from my perspective, I think what the Mountain West has done was brilliant. One, they put a stake in the ground saying we're not anybody's doormat. And I think that makes a big difference. And that should make you, as a member of the conference, feel really good. The conference isn't just going to kowtow to anybody that comes along and makes a threat. The next thing is I think it puts you in a good position. Well, if San Diego State leaves, fine. They were going to be gone anyway. But it makes your organization feel like it's got a little more control over its own destiny, right? And so I think the Mountain West has a big upside coming forward. My next question to you is, how do you feel about this idea of the AAC and the Mountain West merging together and then creating two divisions, one in the West and one in the East, and then you guys having a championship game? I know it's been talked about several times over the last several years. Are we at the point where there's really no other small schools to bring up, and you guys need to start looking towards the AAC?
Well, personally, I'll just say up front that I would be in favor of that. I think the Mountain West is hitting a point where they need to make a decision to preserve their conference. Either they need to go really aggressive and pull up some additional teams, maybe go after some of those bigger FCS schools like North Dakota State, South Dakota State, see if they can give them a package that would get them to join the conference, or they need to do what you're talking about and start looking at other avenues, other options like merging with the American. The big issue I see with that is, first off, historically, Mountain West Conference leadership has not been that far forward, driven, aggressive. I don't see, Gloria Nevarez is the new Mountain West commissioner. We really have no idea what she's going to bring to the table because she's so brand new to this. Obviously, she's setting up a hard line right here at San Diego State, and that's great. She has a lot of experience with the Pac-12 and with the Big 12. So she obviously is competent coming in and doing the right things with this deal. Will she make the move to approach the American Athletic Conference and push out east? I know right now, just talking athletic directors, Boise State's own Jeremiah Dickey, who I'll say off the bat is an incredible athletic director, one of the best we've ever had. But
Yes.
maybe the one thing I disagree with him is his view on playing East Coast teams. And he has said that he doesn't see any benefit to Boise State playing east of the Mississippi. And that's in a direct Twitter response to something I put out. So there is some pushback, definitely from the member institutions themselves and potentially from the conference leadership. Is it a great idea? Is it one that gets thrown around? Sure. But I don't think that is the direction the Mountain West is going to go. I can see the American Athletic trying to push it, but I don't see the Mountain West trying to push that in the future. The question, should it happen? Yes. Will it happen? I don't think so.
So the BYU model is play anywhere, anytime, right? And and even though they are a little bit different, BYU is the largest religious institution. You know, the organization for the school is much wider because of the church. But honestly, when Boise was the most famous in the early 2000s and mid 2000s, is when they were playing big time teams. You beat Oklahoma. You traveled back east to play against I think you had a game against Georgia or Alabama. I mean,
Georgia.
you were willing to do those things. As we've now come to find out with this last year of realignment talk, we now all know that 3/4 of the population of the United States is east of the Mississippi. So if you want to be relevant, you want to play in those big woods, as it were, you have to be willing to travel to do that. So do you think they might change their opinion on that, or are they going to dig in and say, you know what, we just want to be big in our corner of the woods?
Well, you talk about BYU's model be play anybody, anytime, any place, anywhere. I mean, that was Boise State's model as well. All the times
Right.
Fiesta Bowl teams, they were going out, they were playing and beating Georgia in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. They were beating Virginia Tech at home the year that they won the ACC there in 2010. They were going and playing Ole Miss. They were going and playing these big schools. They were going to Michigan State. They were going all of these big programs. And there is, I think, right now a goal within Boise State to associate themselves with the recruitment beds and with the conference in general, the Pac-12 location. I think that's the goal, is to create. I think that's where Jeremiah Dickey is coming from. He sees the relationships that can be built with the Pac-12 schools and the focus on recruitment especially in the age of NIL, when everything is now off the board. The focus geographic locations, what you have direct control over, focusing on that West Coast. I think that's where his drive and his direction is. Will things change as potentially the Mountain West starts to slip away? Something I've talked about a lot on my channel is East Coast bias, and I have to define that for a couple of people, so I'll throw it out here right now in case some people aren't familiar with it. I'm sure BYU fans are, but East Coast bias is the fact that, like you said, the majority of the population centers are on the East Coast. That's the first factor. So you have a lot more eyeballs, a lot more viewers, and a lot more people that are writing articles, being part of the media, promoting the teams on the East Coast. The West Coast teams just don't get that same level of promotion. The second factor is that the East Coast teams get all the time slots because they're on the East Coast. That's what drives it, because of the viewer market.
And the time zones, right? People are up earlier.
Right, and the time zones people up. So if you've got a Mountain West game or a Pac-12 game, that thing's not going to be on until 8 p.m. or later. I mean, I went to school on the East Coast. I can't tell you how many games I had to start watching at 10:30 p.m. when I test the next day. Whereas an American Athletic Conference team or an SEC or ACC, those would probably show up sometime around, like 3 or 4 p.m. at the latest on those time slots. And so the way you combat that, the way Boise State made its name, the way it's got its brand out in front of people, was playing the East Coast teams on their level and beating them.
Right.
When you start talking about the American Athletic Conference, the rise of that conference, and the Mountain West, those are the two top Group of 5 conferences. You have to have the head-to-head matchups to be able to show that you can overcome the East Coast bias and you're as good as that conference. And you take those away, now there's no comparisons, and you're only letting the bias factor play in with nothing to counter it. So I don't think it's the right decision. Like I said, Jeremiah Dickey, I've agreed with every single other thing he did, and I love him as athletic director. And I would rather he stayed athletic director than cede on this point. But that is the one thing that I've disagreed with him, is the move to play more teams on the West Coast, which I think really pushes you farther into relevancy than challenging the big dogs on their turf in the East.
Very, very well said. And I agree with everything you're saying. And yeah, we'll touch on that a little bit more in a minute. I got a super chat here from Just a Rowdy Dude from South Carolina. Thank you. I appreciate the super chat. And I just want to make everybody aware of, he gave me $10. If he had put that into a 2-month subscription, all of his comments would have been read and it would have been the same amount. So if you guys want to make sure all your comments are read, just do a month-to-month subscription. You can always cancel it, but it would then get all of your comments read. So let's read this really quick. If the Big 12 adds Gonzaga for all sports but football, would it behoove Boise to approach the Big 12 for football only, then have the other sports replace Gonzaga in the WCC for non-football? What do you think about that?
Well, it's something that's already happened. Boise State has already attempted to approach the Mountain West when the Big 12, when the last round of conference realignment happened. There was talks for Boise State joining the Big 12. They were kind of one of those top 4 teams that were being considered. And I'm talking about the first round of Big 12 realignment when they decided instead to petition the NCAA to allow them to have a conference championship game without actually having 12 teams.
Right.
So that first round, Boise State did that. They did approach as a football-only member. The Big 12 decided not to go with them. This last round, my understanding was they were approaching both ways. They were trying to get basketball in as well. It didn't end up working out, so they tried to do football-only, and they also weren't successful. So it is something that has been done. I think that when you talk about Boise State to the Big 12, you're not talking all sports. And that has been a determinator. Jeremiah Dickey has talked about that. About that as a play in conference realignment is finding a good, suitable home for the other Boise State teams. It is a major step down from the Mountain West to go put their other sports into those other lower level conferences. And it's kind of a major sacrifice to elevate football. I've always said that football is the main moneymaker. It's the one that gives you the national relevance, that gives you the money. So if you have to sacrifice other programs for football, you have to do it. But I don't think that's the move that the administration is making right now. So they would have to have a safe home, a good home for their other non-football schools before the current athletic administration would be willing to just play forward and just put football in as an only. Unless potentially it was a guaranteed deal and there were a lot of other potential restrictions that came with it. But I think that's a major play. It's a major factor that should be addressed. I just don't know if the current athletic administration is going to go for that.
And I think the really well thought out expression of that is, hey, we want to be for us, but we also think we bring value. And that's where going to the Big 12 and saying, hey, look, we're willing to do anything. Just take us on as football. Gonzaga can flip. They can do all our other sports, particularly basketball. And between the two schools, you service all the athletics that you could have in a big conference, right? So I don't think that's a crazy idea. I think if anybody could come up with something like that, it'd be Brett Yormark, who he's been very flexible, and he's tried to come up with as many good ways to bring money to the conference. So who knows? I wouldn't rule anything out at this point.
Well,
Go ahead.
I also want to address this idea that Boise State's a football-only institution, and they're not. Boise State's
Right.
first smaller athletic programs like track and field have been winning national championships for a long time. Their golf has been doing great. But when you talk about the two moneymakers, football and basketball, Boise State in their basketball program is a 2-time back-to-back appearances in the NCAA tournament. They're not going on those long drives that San Diego State is, and I'm not saying that basketball-wise they're at that same level. But they're definitely putting the money in the investments. They're getting the transfer portal working in their favor, and they're building that program in the right direction. And Leon Rice has multiple 20-plus wins for the program there. He's winningest coach so far for Boise State basketball. He just eclipsed that, I think, last season or a couple seasons ago. But they're not just a one sport school anymore. They bring value in multiple different levels. So when you look at Boise State, the major thing that holds them out isn't their athletic programs. I don't think it's their football. I don't think it's their basketball. Let's keep them out of the Big 12. It's an outdated way of viewing TV markets, which I've talked about in other videos, that is keeping Boise State out. And that is the main issue.
Right. Demographics is how you say that, and it's hard to you're not going to move 1 million or 2 million more people in the Boise Valley to make those demographics go up anytime soon. So it's something we're just going to take time. But I really hope that Boise gets that call up. I think they deserved it. They've deserved it for a while. They've been a great rival for BYU, especially through independence. And those games have been electric. Every one of them's gone down to the wire. And I really have appreciated knowing that Boise's been willing to play BYU 1-1, right? And I think that's been important. So as far as I'm concerned, I think, and most BYU fans would say the same thing. They think you guys do belong. It's just a matter of where do we find a fit, right?
Well, and if I can address that issue, the demographics.
Sure, go ahead, please. Yeah.
And it plays off perfectly off of this comment, if you don't mind me reading it.
No, go ahead, please. Yeah.
The Mountain West is suffering from the same problem that the WAC had, being stuck in a certain area of the country, and a lot of that is the fact that they're looking at TV markets, and there's this idea of looking at what a college football team can bring to the table viewership-wise, based on the certain amount of people living in a certain geographic area. And maybe that made sense, 20, maybe even 10 years ago, when there were streaming, when it was traditional TV market platforms, your Dish and DirecTV and all these other platforms. That is how you got your television. So they were selling TV packages to the fan bases, and you were seeing direct income from people watching on television screens. In the digital age, that makes no sense. That idea of looking at how many people are in a certain area, it's not about that anymore. It's about streaming services, about line cutting services, going on YouTube TV or Hulu Plus or whatever, ESPN Plus, Spubio, however you're watching it. Most people don't have traditional streaming packages anymore. They're using traditional television packages anymore. They're using these streaming devices. And so, for instance, Boise State, sure, they're in a small city, small location, small state, Idaho, compared to other states around the country, but consistently they are in the top of the group of five and outdoing many Power Five teams in viewership. Just last year, according to school's own metrics, they had over 800,000 views per game. And take in mind, that's without being on ESPN. That's with being on Fox, which was a bad deal for the Mountain West, taking themselves off ESPN. It definitely decreased the viewership. But with being on Fox, they still had 800,000 views per game for the Mountain West. And even other conservative non-school outlets are reporting at least 350,000. So they are one of the top teams. Right now, they're actually the sixth most viewed team out of the group of five. And if you don't count the two academy schools, which have the entire military watching their games,
right.
Fourth. And those other three schools that are ahead of them are BYU, Cincinnati, and UCF. Three schools on their way to the Power Five right now. Boise State's the next school out when it comes to TV viewership, because right now it's not about how many people are living in your city. It's about your national brand. It's about imaging. It's about marketing. And Boise State, because of their blue turf, Boise State, because of their winning success, because of what they've done on the national stage, has created a brand that everyone is familiar with. You can go anywhere in the country. You can go to New York. You can go to South Carolina. You can go to California. And you ask them, hey, what do you think about Boise State? They're going to have an opinion. You ask what they think about UNLV or San Diego State or SMU, unless you're in the state where that team is from, people are maybe probably not even know about the team. Secondly, they're not going to care either way. But everybody has an opinion about Boise State one way or the other because they have a national brand.
You're a great evangelist, and I love this. We need to do more, and I'm going to pause here and tell everybody, look Bronco up on Twitter and on YouTube. His videos, for one thing, they're very well informed. Nothing is lick spittle. He spends the time, and I immediately had an attraction to the news and broadcasting that he's been doing over the last while. And I would encourage all Big 12 and Pac-12 people to start watching his show. And I think this one thing that I've tried to do is give a voice to disenfranchised fan bases. Every school in the Mountain West, Oregon State, Washington State, people that are generally overlooked. This show and my Holy Rival show, which I'll have to have you on that show too. I think you'd have a really fun time talking to Wild Ute, but to give the voice to the voiceless, and I think that's what's really important. And I've taken that as sort of one of my mission statements is we need to do what we can to get that story out, to sell it to more people. I have people that watch my channel coast to coast. I had somebody join from the Philippines the other day. I got one from England last week. I'm getting Southeastern Conference and ACC and Big Ten people watching this show. And so I think it's really important that we support each other. And the more college football is such an amazing sport, and there's no reason we should be excluding people. If anything, we should be opening the tent up wider and just sharing those messages as much as possible. Let me get to another comment here. Let's see. By the way, South Carolina dude, he says the West Coast Conference is great basketball. You are exactly right. It is good basketball. If you don't know about it, watch it this fall. So Charles M says, by the way, Charles, thanks for being here. Ignoring the service academies, Boise State posted the third best regular football season average per game viewership. You just mentioned this. He mentions Colorado State, Tulane, and Utah State and SMU. Of those 5 schools, do you count yourself as the number one expansion option?
Well, I think Boise State should have been the number one expansion option for the last 10, 15 years. Ever since Boise State beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl, I thought they showed that they were worthy of beating top-level teams, and it only accelerated from then. And in the last 10 years, you can't say that Boise State hasn't been one of the best teams across the country. What they've been able to do as far as create their brand and continue their winning success, being the I think right now they're the second winningest program in college football history right now. I think they just lost that out with the coaching change. There's a little bit of a backdrop, but now they're on their way back up. But Boise State, yeah, I definitely think that they should be the number one behind there, because you look at those other schools, most of those teams, with the exception of, I think he said Colorado State was in there too. They haven't done anything. But when you look at those schools like Tulane, like SMU, Houston, Cincinnati, UCF, their success has been recent, and it's been sporadic. Not so much for UCF. They've been pretty consistent. They've been that rivalry right up there with Boise State as far as who's the best group of 5 school. But other teams, when you look at Cincinnati, last couple of years ago, 2021, goes and makes it to the playoffs. In 2022, they only win 9 games. And the rest of the American Athletic Conference did the same. UCF, all these expansion candidates, UCF, Houston. Houston had 8 wins. UCF had 9 wins. There are a lot of those things. I'm not going to call them flash in the pan, but they haven't showed that they have the winning, successful culture. Boise State, through multiple coaching transitions, through multiple top-level quarterbacks, multiple top-level players, no matter who leaves, they continue to find success the next year. Look at 2012. 2011, you've got Kellen Moore, Doug Martin on the team leading that. I mean, those are historic players. Kellen Moore probably going to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. The next year, you lose almost your entire offense, and they're still able to go out and get 11 wins. Name another school in the country that's able to do that, lose that level of success, and come back. Boise State should be the top expansion candidate when you look at what they're able to bring in consistently year after year, TV viewership wise. And a lot of that, some of that's because of blue turf, but a lot of that is just the fact that they win no matter who's at the helm.
I could not agree with you more. We'll do a couple more comments here in just a second. A quick reminder, if you want your comment to be read, guaranteed, send me a super chat, and we'll make sure that highlights to me, and I'll make sure we get it on the show. Everybody go to Bronco and look him up on Twitter and on his YouTube page. Okay, so Charles has got another comment here about UConn is number 12. San Diego State's number 13. These are TV viewer numbers, is what he's talking about again. Fresno is number 10. If you take the 4 that are next listed, UCF, Houston, BYU, and Cincinnati, is there any reason in the next 5 years that Boise State shouldn't be running the table with G5 and qualifying for that bowl every year?
Well, here's the issue. It's not so much whether or not Boise State can do it. It's the conference that they play in. The Mountain West has been the better conference consistently over the last few years than the American Athletic Conference. But despite that fact, the American Athletic Conference champion has always been the one that's going up to that New Year's Six Bowl. Talk about 2019. 2019 is the biggest travesty in all of this example that I'm presenting for college football. In 2019, you had a 12-1 Memphis team versus a 12-1 Boise State team. Okay, both of those teams were 12-1. Boise State's only loss was to BYU, and that was with a brand new quarterback. After Hank Bachmeier had gotten injured versus Hawaii, you had Jalen Henderson coming in. So that was his first game getting the full start. He played really well. It came down to the wire. I think it was like a 3-point loss. BYU was able to pull out the win. That was their only loss that year. Memphis, 12-1, their loss was to Temple. Comparing the losses, that was worst loss. The only reason that Memphis got in over Boise State was because SMU started out the season super highly ranked because of a lot of factors, because of that East Coast bias, and because they were in the AAC, and because they'd had a good winning record before. A lot of other Boise State, a lot of the Mountain West teams had done the same, but they weren't getting in the rankings early. SMU rode an early train, a very easy season to begin with, got pretty highly ranked. Memphis beat SMU. They then catapulted into the rankings, and then they were able to ride that through to the end, really coming off of that one win. Other teams in the AAC beat up on SMU. Cincinnati was able to beat SMU as well. They were able to get in the rankings because of that win. It was all because of East Coast bias playing the factor and putting American athletic teams high in the rankings to start the season, and then that becoming the end result because the Mountain West wasn't able to have that same advantage. And so a 12-1 Boise State team versus a 12-1 Memphis team, the Memphis team gets picked. So my main
I think that's wrong. I absolutely think that's wrong.
Right. So my main point here is when you look at the Mountain West, when you look at the American Athletic Conference, consistently the Mountain West has had more Power 5 wins. They have had more wins head-to-head against other conferences. And throughout the entire time of both conferences, the Mountain West owns a winning record over the American Athletic Conference. I believe it's 54% wins over the American Athletic Conference. Thin, but still better. Despite that fact, the American Athletic Conference teams get those leads. So a American Athletic Conference team can get to New Year's Six going with 2 losses. They can be 10-2 and win their conference championship and get to the New Year's Six. A Mountain West team, they got to be probably undefeated or have 1 loss. And that 1 loss has got to be a quality loss, and they have to have beaten other good teams. So can Boise State dominate even now that these other top-level teams have left the group of 5? I'm not sure, because those teams weren't top-level teams until they joined the American Athletic Conference, until their conference started pushing them, until they fed off of the East Coast bias, were able to rise up and became top-level teams. So I don't know if UTSA is going to be that next UCF. I don't know if, who is it, UAB who just joined? I don't know if they're going to be that next, UTEP. I don't know if, no, not UTEP, sorry, North Texas. I don't know if they're going to be that next Cincinnati or UCF. Because those teams were nobodies before the American Athletic Conference started pushing them and building them up. And they were able to become the teams that they became later on. So right now, it doesn't look like there's any competition for Boise State out there. But I'm telling you, Boise State is going to have good seasons like they always do. But it's not going to matter because in the end, the American Athletic Conference, especially if you're not playing them head-to-head, they're going to have that advantage. The Sun Belt is potentially also being able to start riding that East Coast bias. They have some top-level teams. They look like they might become that next top group of 5. So will Boise State be able to go? People just assume that it's going to be the case, but that has not been the case in the past. And that's going to be a tough road regardless of who is in the group of 5 because of Boise State and everything that they had to combat.
So if we take that all as rote and that's gospel, then isn't it in all the Mountain West's best interest to try to do a formation of a partnership with the AAC? I mean, I don't understand why that wouldn't be your very first point of order the next time the conference gets together. These are smart people, and I'm assuming this Navarez lady is smart. Why can't they look in the mirror and say, yeah, we need to do this type of a merge. We need a scheduling, something to coordinate with them, because right now there's no way you're going to beat being in the worst, the last time zone. There's no way you can beat your geography. There's no way you can beat the fact that everybody's in bed by the time you're playing your good games. So instead of swimming upstream, why not swim downstream and do the more the merrier, and call Mike Oresco and say, let's put this thing together?
I think that part of it's probably pride. You've got pride in your conference and you want to create this idea. The Mountain West has been kind of focusing on, they're trying to play almost into being the Pac-12. They're focusing on their academic institutions. They're focusing on their beautiful scenery, and they're building themselves up great top-level historic conference. They're not going out there and promoting their teams like the American Athletic Conference. They're not going out and saying, national champion in our midst, which UCF has claimed. Boise State could claim that the same way. They're not doing that. The American Athletic Conference, they have young, excited, agile leadership that is adjusting to all the changes in college football. When the American Athletic Conference teams left to go join the Big 12, the American Athletic Conference gave them a congratulations, said, hey, that's awesome for you because we are the top builders. We are
exactly.
Our teams are Power 5 level worthy, and that's who we are. The Mountain West is a little bit of a different situation, but I guarantee you look right now with what's happening in San Diego State, it's not those same welcoming environment feelings because it's a different mindset. It's saying we should be a top conference, but we're not going to embrace the new era of college football, the new social order. We're not going to embrace this new culture and go out and be aggressive in the same way. And so I think part of it is potentially the mindset of the Mountain West Conference leadership that is going to hold them back from this. And the other fact is that if the Mountain West joins with the American Athletic Conference, it's not the American Athletic Conference becoming the Mountain West. It's the Mountain West becoming the American Athletic Conference. So you're basically give up your power, which is always tough. I can't think in modern times there have been very, very few conference merges. I know there were some back in the early days of college football, but there hasn't been a lot. And the more power you have, the longer conference is in place, the harder it is for that current leadership to say, for the for the good of our teams, we're going to accept this new direction. It's just something with what has happened with the Mountain West leadership, with what they have shown, I just don't see that being a mindset that they could embrace.
So it's adapt or die.
Yeah.
Bronco. It's adapt or die. The Big East ceased to exist as a football conference because it did not adapt and it died. The Pac-12 has not adapted and it's about to cease to exist. If not in this next 2 or 3 years, in 5 years. There's just no way that the Pac-12 can stay on an island and say we are the exceptional conference of champions, and continue to exist in the mode they are. If they don't change and adapt, the other conferences that are actually looking down the road farther, they're going to pass them. That's how the Big 12, I mean, the Pac 12 had every opportunity to absorb Big 12 schools, but they didn't want to lower themselves to them, right? They didn't want to lower their academic standards. Well, sometimes the more rooted, let's see, but not, let's see, what's the word? Mundane, even sometimes the more mundane but popular ideas take over, the more exceptional, the more wise. And that's because the more wise and exceptional can think they're playing a different game. Well, the rest of the world's moved on. And so I guess what I'm doing right now is I want you, and I'm hoping the rest of the people that are in the Mountain West, you guys start clamoring to your leadership. Go to them and say, hey, we want to stay relevant. The only way you're going to do that is if you go from strength to strength. And unfortunately, the AAC has supplanted the Mountain West. If for no other reason than they're the ones who have been willing to play ball with all these other leagues and all these other TV deals. And the Mountain West and the Pac-12 might cease to exist in 5 years.
I will, and I was on the same line. I said that in my video when I talked about San Diego State leaving and what this meant for the Mountain West. If they are not quick to make changes and they're not quick to find teams to add to their conference or do something, then it might cease to exist in the next 10 years. But you raise an interesting possibility here, and this is something I definitely could see happening. If the Pac-12, which I've got to say, first off, I love everything that is happening to the Pac-12. They 100% deserve it. If there's a conference in the country that has reaped their own destiny and is now sowing their just rewards, it is the Pac-12, which has tried to hold themselves up as this Ivy League institution almost of academic elites and has just absolutely lost touch with what it means to be a college football conference in the modern era of college football. I absolutely love what's happening. But if, as is anticipated, the Pac-12 gets raided by the Big Ten potentially again, the Big Ten has already said that they're open to expanding to more Pac-12 teams, or the Big 12 goes after the four corner schools and brings them into the conference, there is a potential here where the Mountain West is now in a strong position to pick up the remnants of whoever is left to come join the Mountain West. Now, if you say that potentially Washington and Oregon go join the Big Ten and Colorado, Arizona, Utah, and Arizona State, right? It's four corner schools, go join the Pac-12, and you now have Oregon State, Stanford, Washington State, and I know I'm missing one right here, but Cal. The rest come join the Mountain West. Regardless of East Coast bias and everything that's going on, that's a pretty strong conference. If you have those teams that we just mentioned, plus Boise State, plus San Diego State, plus Fresno State, plus Air Force, plus other teams that are rising in the conference, Colorado State look like they're investing a lot of money in their programs. That is a conference that could renegotiate their TV deal, hopefully get back to ESPN, and then compete with the ACC, with the AAC, and the American Athletic Conference and the Sun Belt as a top conference in the Group of Five, and even make that legitimate case as a Power Six member. And that is something that I think right now, when you're talking about Boise State not wanting to play East Coast teams and create these relationships with West Coast schools, when you talk about the Mountain West being hesitant to make these expansions over to the American Athletic Conference, that I think is a possibility that they're holding out for. And if it came down to it, they would be very, very interested in building that new conference.
Don't you think it would be the reverse, though? The Pac-12 absorbs the Mountain West.
With who's left?
But it doesn't matter. They have the political power and stuff, Bronco. I don't think there's any way that you're not going to have Cal and Stanford join Mountain West. That's not going to happen.
I think at that point they have two possibilities. The Pac-12 is going to cease to exist at that point. If the scenario that I've just described happens, if the Big 12 takes the four corner schools,
Yes.
Oregon go to the Big 10, that is not a conference anymore. You have
Right.
5 teams remaining at that point, right? So that is not a conference at that point. So they are now faced with the decision of dropping football, going independent, or joining the Mountain West. They're not going to drop football. They're too historic. They're not going to go independent because, especially in this modern age, schools don't want to do that. BYU's joining the Big 12. They were maybe the last ones to make it truly work. Liberty's joining Conference USA. The independent era is coming to a close. Notre Dame isn't really independent anymore because they're so associated with the ACC.
Right.
So it's the independent era is coming to a close. It's not something that's truly sustainable for most teams. It's a very hard road, and for a Power 5 team, it's really not sustainable. So it's coming to a close across college football. Independence is not an option. So the only option they're going to have available, they'll try to play the strong game and say, all right, you know what? Fine. We'll welcome some of your top institutions into our conference. Try to maybe
Right.
teams. But I don't think the Mountain West schools would choose to go do that. I think that they would be in a position to say, we're the stronger conference. We have a pretty good basketball conference overall for sure. We have a pretty good football conference, and we got more members than you. You come join us, and the Mountain West then expands to 16 or 17, whatever. They become then a super conference.
Right.
Having any
Sorry, I think I lagged out there. Sorry about that.
No problem. I just said in that situation, I don't see the Pac-12 having the ground to stand on to make that case.
Okay. And it may work that way. I just the way I look at it is, I think that let's just say that the Pac-12 bifurcates like you just described, and you have say 5 schools that are still together. Let's say it's 4, because I think it'll be Wazoo, Oregon State, Cal, and Stanford. But the just from a naming and perception idea, wouldn't you want to come across as you're joining a P5 rather than you're absorbing P5 schools? Because the perception is what you take to your TV partners, right?
Right.
And which do you think they're going to want to pay for? A slimmed down Pac-12, Pac-10, whatever, or a more beefy Mountain West? Just from a naming perspective, I think it would be, in my opinion, you guys would be better off joining the Pac-12 and being in a Power 5 conference. But who knows what happens with that? Go ahead.
I get your view for sure on that. I think maybe potentially, at least in name only, it would remain the Pac-12, but it would be the Mountain West leadership taking the helm. It would be.
Okay, that's fair.
So it's like, and then also the question becomes, is that a Power 5 conference? The Big East, lost everybody, and Boise State and San Diego State were set to go join the Big East. Like,
Right.
I don't think it was 2010 though. I believe that it was 2013 or 2014, something like that, somewhere around there. I might be off.
Okay.
But anyhow, they were set to leave the Mountain West and go join the Big East, and then the Big East lost its Power 5 status, and
Right.
the Mountain West. So I think that potentially in name only, it would be the Pac-12 still, but it also wouldn't necessarily have that same Power 5 draw, because after everything happened, I don't know if it would maintain that Power 5 status.
I don't think it will either way. I think you're going to have Power 4. The ACC is not going to blow up quite yet in 2026 when they negotiate, unless the Pac-12 is some way able to cobble together a media deal. You're only going to have 4 power conferences, and then you're going to have 2, I guess you would call them second level, and that would be the AAC and the Mountain West, because that would mean that you would have Washington State and Oregon State, who I think are just getting jobbed in this whole thing. They deserve, just because their conference was run wrong, they shouldn't be penalized, but you can't change history. All right, let's just go through a few comments we got here. From Alex. Alex, you're an Air Force guy. I really appreciate your service if you're a veteran, and I appreciate you watching today. He says Air Force is overlooked big time when it comes to national media and respect level around college football. I don't think you disagree with that, right?
Absolutely not. Part of that is the fact Alex and I have actually talked before. He's come on my channel. He's a great guy. He runs a great Air Force focused football Facebook group. So definitely a great guy that has brought a lot to the perspective here for the Mountain West. But yeah, we've talked about this in the past. Part of that is the fact that Air Force, they're locked into those academy schools, and it doesn't leave them a lot of other options for their scheduling. And so sometimes they end up playing those weaker opponents. But they are a team that has gone out there and have won a lot of games consistently under Troy Calhoun. But another factor is their offense is just not exciting to watch. It's very, very effective, and it works with what they have. But as far
Right.
as tuning in to watch their games, it's just not exciting. And so that also ends up hurting them in the long run. But yeah, absolutely agree. When you look at top teams in the group of five, Air Force is consistently always one of those teams, but never gets the respect that they should end up getting in the long run.
I know this, going to Colorado Springs, playing against their Veer triple option with chop blocks back in the day, nobody wanted to play Air Force
Oh yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
Nobody. I mean, USC didn't want to play Air Force. Notre Dame didn't want to play Air Force. They were very, very dirty in a little way. I'm not piling on them, but they have different types of athletes, so they had to come up with different ways to be competitive, and that was one of the things they did. Let's just bust through a few of these. I'll try to get through as many as I can. If you want your comment read for sure, give me a super chat or subscribe to my channel, and all your chats will always be read. Glenn is in the Philippines. Glenn, I appreciate you watching. Thank you very much. Blake is in the house, and he says, keep up the good work. Thanks, Blake. Robert again says, Boomer. Hey, it's Bomber, Robert. It's Bomber, not Boomer. I'm just teasing. I'm not sure what your t-shirt is. I'm going to guess it's BYU. I don't know. Blake says, Bronco has a good channel. I watch frequently. Rock Chalk. There you go. You're getting pats on the back. That's pretty good. Charles says, what about the AAC plus Mountain West Conference merger? That's what we've been talking about it. I've been talking about it since last week when San Diego threw their gauntlet down. I really think you guys would be the first super conference, the first to 20. And I think the sky's the limit if you guys do that. In 2026, who knows? Maybe you're good enough to be a power conference. Let's see here. Alex again says 2-11 and 2 Mountain West teams in 2019. Is this what you were talking about earlier? Finished 22 and 23 in the final polls. Do you want to add anything to that?
I think we covered that pretty much in depth.
Okay. Let's see here. Charles says UTSA and UAB just won their previous conference champions. UTSA is a sleeping giant because of where it's at. UAB, I don't know about them. Do you have an opinion about UAB?
UAB is a team that I think they're in the South, so they have that option with the recruiting. My other team, Liberty, has played them a couple of times. So they're definitely a team that has been competitive at a major level. I don't know. I would have to say that we'll have to see how it goes. The best place for them to succeed is in the American Athletic Conference, but I think there's probably a few other schools ahead of them there that are going to succeed before they do. But you look at a team like Tulane, you never saw them doing anything. I mean, they were consistent
Right.
2 or 3 win football team, and then they go in and they go to a New Year's Six game this last year. So I definitely, American Athletic Conference is the place to be for schools that want to find ways to succeed despite their geography, and UAB is not in a bad spot.
I think USF has got a huge upside. USF has just gotten their AAU qualification, and they have big dreams of being in the SEC or the Big Ten. I don't think that's going to happen, but boy, they certainly have a lot of population around them that knows how to play ball.
And you talk about conference realignment, they have absolutely been shifted. Former Big East, team, former Power Five school, and then they join the American Athletic Conference. It's like, all right, USF is going to run this thing, and they get absolutely demolished. And now
Right.
they're one of the worst teams in that conference. They definitely have a lot of high upside. With UCF now, though, going to the Power Five and being a Power Five school, so now you've got to compete with Florida State, UCF, and Florida in the state of Florida for recruits. And now you're just this lower tier American Athletic Conference team. It's going to be an uphill battle, but they have the regalia, they have the reps, they could do it. They've done it before in the Power Five, but we'll have to see what happens.
They just got $320 million to do a new stadium too on campus. So anytime you have money you could spend, you're going to do well. I'm not sure how big their like alumni base is or anything like that, though. And that goes a long way to your success as well. Charles says if you don't join the Big 12 and you're in the G5, then you need to support a merger. And yeah, I think we've talked about that enough. AC makes almost double what the Mountain West teams make. Now, I think this is a big point. Another reason why I see a merger being in your best interest is, one, it'll raise your profile and you'll make a little bit more money.
Well, and if a merger doesn't end up happening, with how the Mountain West is looking to handle this next round of conference realignment, new Mountain West Commissioner Gloria Navarez has already said that she feels uncomfortable with larger conferences. The sweet spot for her is 10 to 12 teams. So the Mountain West loses San Diego State. They're still at 11. I don't see them going out and grabbing more teams to come into the conference with the current leadership at the helm. So they're probably going to stay at 11. They're continue to sink further and further, outside of the public eye. And I could definitely see, if the expansion plans to try and go join the Power Five don't work out, UNLV, Colorado State, maybe Fresno State, all going and making bids to the American Athletic Conference. I mean, we almost lost a couple of teams last year, and they were able to keep it together. Mountain West was able to keep together instead. But maybe Boise State would also make a play in that direction. So even if a merger doesn't happen down the road, and I am doubtful that Mountain West leadership would wholesale say we're going to accept this,
Right.
definitely see current Mountain West schools ending up in the American Athletic Conference in the next 5 years.
What do you think the possibility of that is? 0 to 100. That Boise State, Fresno, UNLV, Colorado State, maybe Air Force, Boise State. Where do you think you're playing ball? And let's just say 4 years.
In 4 years, if the Mountain West has not expanded and if they lose San Diego State, in 4 years, I see Boise State trying to get into the American Athletic Conference. But I think at a certain point, they might also face the same issues that they currently have with trying to get into the Power Five. I mean, the American Athletic Conference tries to build themselves as this Power Six. If they add San Diego State, not San Diego State, but if they add Colorado State, UNLV, and say Air Force, so now they have the 3 academy schools, get Army to come in as well, there might not be a spot in their mind for Boise State because they're viewing things a similar way. They're looking at the traditional TV markets. And so Boise State may or may not end up on the wrong side of that equation, especially if the current Boise State leadership isn't aggressive about pursuing the American Athletic Conference. I don't know if the American Athletic Conference is going to come after Boise State aggressively.
Yeah, I think you guys need to be proactive. You need to be leading that charge, and I hope you do. I don't want Boise State to get left behind. Before I forget, I want to ask you. So, what do you think happens with not only San Diego State but the Pac-12? July 21st is Pac-12 Media Days. What do you think happens by July 20th?
Well, right now the Pac-12 has done something really funny from somebody that doesn't want San Diego State to go to the Power Five, because they basically told them, you know what? Yeah, we're considering you, but we're not going to make any decisions until after our media deal. So they're reconstructing their media deal right now. They're trying to get a better one, and they have been having a hard time finding bidders to come in and take them on. I think at one point they were down to looking at Apple TV was making some offers of being seriously considered. And that's when you know you're in a tough spot, when you have Apple TV as your potential next streaming service. So they are trying right now to see if they can get a good enough deal with the members that they currently have. And if they do, they're not going to bring in San Diego State. They're going to say this deal was good enough and we survived and we're good and we move on. We make enough money and that's what we care about.
Right.
Our chances of getting to New Year's Six, our chances of getting to the playoffs, as long as we're making the money and we're able to maintain our elitist academic atmosphere, we're fine. Now, I think that if that media deal is not what they want it to be, then at that point they will start saying, okay, yeah, we're definitely open to adding some more teams. And then maybe they look at San Diego State and SMU. So where do I think the Pac-12 is going to be here? I think that they are I don't think they're going to get the media deal that they want. And I'll be honest up front with this. I would say that as far as my predictions go with the Pac-12, they're a really hard one to get. They could go multiple different ways. I would say the crystal ball of what the Pac-12 is going to do, I would not give myself more than a 50-50 shot on my predictions here. But personally, looking at what has happened so far, I think they're not going to get the deal they want. I think they will attempt to take San Diego State. I think they will potentially then end up adding SMU, and I think Mountain West will end up sticking at 11 teams.
Do you think that well, let's talk percentages and actual numbers. The latest number I heard was 22.5, and I heard 70% streaming. Is that enough to keep the conference together?
Wow. I mean, it is. We talked about the digital age, right? So streaming is not necessarily a bad thing. It definitely depends
Right.
what kind of streaming it is. If you're ending up on your streaming is like YouTube TV, that's pretty good.
It
Like
is. Yeah.
have that. But if your streaming is, Amazon, or your streaming is Apple TV, that is going to seriously reduce and restrict your viewership to pretty much just your fan base at that point. The common man, the people outside of your current program, and that's the danger of looking at purely geographic markers and brands. If you're only appealing to the people within your city's footprint, you are forever limited by the people that live in your city. If you have a national brand like Boise State, your limits are you're limitless, and your success is then dictated by the success of your program. But yeah, 70% streaming. I think they would have to add San Diego State.
I think that would be tough. That would be tough for schools that have options. The Four Corners School. This is something I've never understood. Maybe I'm a dummy, so maybe you could explain this to me. But if you're one of the Four Corners schools and you're seeing Washington, Oregon have wandering eyes for somewhere else, if not today, it's going to be in the very, very near future, within 2 or 3 years to the Big Ten. Once they get their house in order, since they've gone through the last year of media negotiation and all that fun stuff. Why would you want to stay in a conference that's virtually dead? You're going to make half as much money than you would make in the Big 12. And the only change you're really making is you're not tied to the academics of Stanford. We're talking about an athletic conference. We're not talking about an academic conference. So how do you sell that to all the people that all they want to do is cheer for your teams?
I'd say 3 factors. Number one, and we're talking about, I don't know about selling it, but I would say reasons why they're doing it. 3 factors. Number one, it's not an academic conference, it's an athletic conference. The Pac-12 does not view themselves that way. They view themselves as academics first and then athletics second. And while that is a noble gesture, it doesn't work in the modern day of college football. You have to be athletics and specifically football first, everything else second. Everything will rise with the success of your football. So that's the first thing, is there's a lot of elitism and pride. I mean, they're in their ivory towers sitting up there completely out of touch with everything that's going on around the country, and they got their noses in the air, and they're not going to take on teams that are successful. I mean, it's at the point where UNLV is a more serious expansion candidate for the Pac-12 than Boise State is. Where the Pac-12 is. That's how backwards they are in their thinking. So that's the first thing, is the success factor. The second thing is, I think they want to see how the Big 12 works this first year of reconstruction. Oklahoma and Texas are gone. The flagships of the Big 12 are gone. TCU just had a great year, but I mean, they're a former Group of Five. They're a very recent Power Five team, but they just had a great year. And so that I think personally, the Big 12 is going to be strong. I think they made great additions. I think UCF is going to be a future powerhouse in the making. They have a massive student campus. I mean, I've been to UCF. I've seen their campus. I've seen their students. They have a massive alumni base. Cincinnati has been super successful at the Group of Five level. Imagine what they'll do at the Power Five. BYU, of course, has the entire world cheering for them with the success of LDS. And then Houston is in a great market area. So they went after some good schools and brought in some good programs. I think the Big 12 is going to be great. But I think when you're looking from the perspectives, from the towers of the Pac-12, you're looking at a conference that now just lost its 2 flagship institutions and is now basically a third Group of Five schools. So they're looking at it as almost a sub-Power Five conference from their own diluted way of thinking. So I think they want to see how it works out. I think they want to see how these new schools come in and perform at the Power Five level. I think they want to come in and see what kind of media buzz the Big 12 is able to generate, what their playoff potential looks like, how many teams they have in the discussion in those upper level rankings, and see if they're still truly a top level Power 5 conference, especially with the competition with the Big 10 and the SEC. Then the third factor, sorry.
No, go ahead. You're on
Yeah.
it. I was taking a deep breath. I caught something in my throat. I'm sorry. That sounded weird.
And then the third factor here is that similar to San Diego State, with this idea that the road back is always available to them, they know that where the Big 12 is, it's not the SEC, it's not the Big 10. They're not necessarily playing in the same pool of potential teams that they could pull in. I mean, Clemson is not going to leave and go join the Big 12. So
right.
The teams that they have available to pull from really right now at this point are Pac-12 or Group of 5. Maybe Florida State, with their discussions, what's come up, maybe you could grab them if they wanted to. But really, you're probably pulling from Pac-12 or Group of 5. They've already said they don't really want to add that many Group of 5 teams or any more Group of 5 teams, so it's Pac-12. The Pac-12 schools know that time is on their side. They can wait this out. They can see what happens. They can see if this media deal works out with the Pac-12, if they're able to regain their footing, reestablish themselves. They would prefer to stay with the Pac-12 because of their history and legacy and their academic institutions. But they know that at the end of the day, the Big 12 is always going to be there for them if they need it as a fallback. So there's not this push, this emphasis. They can wait for the conference to fall apart and then say, you know what, we were Big 12 all along. We're ready to go. So they're not in a spot right now where they have to leave. I think if the Big 12 starts showing success, they start continuing to put teams in the playoffs like they did this last season. They continue to be one of those top teams, second or third in the Power 5, outclassing the group of the Pac-12, bringing in the money, continuing to have those viewerships. I think at that point, then you would draw in the Four Corner schools. Assuming the Pac-12 stays alive, I would see those, and the Big 12 has success, I would see the Four Corner schools joining the Big 12 in the next 3 to 4 years.
I think you're spot on. Now, it could happen sooner than later, but just because of the way geography works out and because we all know that the ACC is on borrowed time, the moment that North Carolina and Florida State and Clemson can escape to the SEC and the Big 10, they're gone. So, and Big 12 is perfectly positioned to pick up 4 more schools in the East to match with West Virginia, Cincinnati, and UCF. You got Louisville, Pitt. You potentially could. I'm spacing some of the other schools. I know I've talked about them in the past, but there's like 4 or 5 schools that they can pick up. They don't have to be desperate to get those schools because they're just going to be available. So it's really just going to come to what's the pain tolerance that the Four Corner schools are willing to go through. But for whatever reason, they're only going through it to their own detriment because Washington and Oregon are gone. And more than likely Stanford is gone as well. Cal, I don't know what happens with them, but they all have a landing place, and it's in the big, the Four Corner schools, at least today, maybe ASU, but the Four Corners by themselves, their next best option is the Big 12. So we'll have to see. I was going to read this comment from South Carolina again. Boise State has never needed an undefeated season more than they do in 2023. You don't disagree with that, right?
Oh, I don't disagree. I haven't done my schedule prediction, so I won't throw out whether or not I think it's going to happen. But I will say this. There's a little optimism in Boise right now. Andy Avalos, he's coming into his 3rd year with the program. The first year was a little rocky, but you had a brand new head coach who'd never been a head coach at the FBS level. You had an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator who had never been coordinators at the FBS level. So you had a brand new team. In addition to that, you had a lot of other cupboards bare when it came to assistants across the board. Andy Avalos has done a great job of building staff around him. There is one of the most exciting quarterbacks in the country in Taylor Green. When you talk about potential, he is the most talented quarterback as far as future raw talent that can be developed that I have ever seen come to Boise State. This kid is going to have a 600-yard rushing season and throw for over 2,500 yards easy this next year.
Really? Okay. That'll be fun to see.
You've got, if you haven't seen any Taylor Green highlights, you got to go watch it. Bronco Vision on YouTube does a great job of putting together highlights, and he made one of Taylor Green's his freshman year. This is a true freshman guy. Go watch his highlights. It is an incredible review of what Taylor was able to put together. He's a tall quarterback. He's fast. He's got a strong arm. He needs a little bit of developing, but we've got a great offensive coordinator, Bush Hammond, coming in. The main point here is we've got the 2 best running backs in the Mountain West in Boise State, Ashton Genty and George Helani, another young guy there in Genty. We've got the best quarterback, or at least the 2nd best quarterback in the Mountain West. We've got a young defense that looked good in their playing time and has a lot of potential. Boise State, could they go undefeated this season? The potential is there. Either way, the future next couple of seasons here look very bright for Boise State. And I think they'll be getting back to those national prominent years here in the next couple.
Well, I know that your quarterback has to be pretty good because he sent Cade Finnegan packing down to BYU. So that tells me that he felt footsteps coming up behind him. So he must be good. I'm looking forward to watching Boise State play this fall. South Carolina, again, getting back to me. Another $10 super chat. Appreciate that. You need to go subscribe to my channel so you don't have to keep doing these expensive super chats. Carolina, it's only $5. You do it, once a month. Yeah, you would have gone 4 months at this point. I appreciate the super chats, but it's a little cheaper if you go subscribe on my channel. Anyway, Fox lost $400 million on the Pac-12 network. No network is going to risk large money on them. I think everybody has seen that. On Apple, you're eliminating a lot of Android users, and you won't be on YouTube TV, Hulu, or ESPN. The exposure issues associated with doing anything with Apple are just monumental, which is why I think it could blow up. I mean, what do you think about that?
Oh, I think that is an absolute death nail for the conference. You talk about the issues you already have with fighting that East Coast bias, having smaller populations playing later, and then you put yourself on a streaming platform that specifically caters to only half of the country. Yeah, I think that if they go with Apple as their subscriber, I mean, I think probably Amazon is a more likely option than Apple if they can get the right numbers out of them. But again, at that point, you're forcing fans to pay for something to watch a specific team that they may or may not already, that they probably don't already have.
Do you think they're going to charge them like an access fee like they do the MLS? So you have to do Apple TV, and then on top of that, you have to pay $10 a month to watch the games?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say you definitely have to buy into it. You'd have to have Apple TV and have Apple TV Plus. So you'd have to have Amazon, their TV viewership package, whether it's Prime or whatever. I don't have it, so I don't know. But you would have to pay for that additional subscription. You're not going to be flipping through a channel and find their games. They're going to disappear off the map. Most voters won't watch their games. The CFP committee might watch their games, though I'm convinced that they don't watch a lot of these West Coast games based on how they rank these teams. But they're going to disappear off the map. And if you go with one of those services, you're definitely going to kill your conference in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Charles M says Apple sucks, so I think we know where he sits with that one. We got from Carolina again, Android's better than iPhone. And I love this. David says, Charles, that's right. So it's nice to hear everybody's backing each other up. This is what my family's like. These guys have been with me a long time. Everybody I've mentioned here has been loyal followers, and I really appreciate you guys continuing to watch my show. We got a few more minutes here. I want to tell everybody, make sure you're following Bronco on Twitter, and also go to his YouTube page, and you got to be watching those videos. They're very entertaining, and I think everybody can tell how intelligent and well-read he is. He's done his research. He doesn't talk out of his butt, and I think when you go there, you're looking at real resources. Let's see here. South Carolina says Virginia Tech. Is that in relation to a different question?
I think when you're talking about schools that they might end up.
Oh, that's right. Might move to the Big 12. That's right. Yeah, Virginia Tech's one of them. Charles says top G5 schools for viewership outranked. Colorado. Yeah, this is painful, isn't it? Colorado, Boston College, Arizona State, who has the second largest alumni in the entire country. Virginia Tech, Houston, UVA, and Duke. Those are just embarrassing numbers when you have had an embarrassment of riches for decades, literally almost 100 years in some of these schools. And yet an upstart, I would say an upstart, 20 years plus with Boise, has outdrawn them since about 2002 or 2003?
Yeah, I think, we got onto the national scale there in 2004 when we had that undefeated regular season when played Louisville in the I forget the bowl game, Independence Bowl maybe. Ended up losing close, but yeah, that's when we kind of burst onto the scene. And then 2006, you go and you win that Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma, and you establish that brand. You had the blue turf; people were aware of it, and maybe it was a little bit of a gimmick, sure, but it also made people aware. And then you start putting that winning tradition behind you. It starts creating this national presence. You're showing up on the cover of ESPN's magazines. You're showing showing up on these big time primetime games, and that's because of the brand. And I mean, I know we're closing here, so I'll just leave it with these thoughts. Again, college football they've been leaning this direction for a while, and I think with NIL, they are fully in this direction. It is completely about your brands. You look about American culture in general, it's not so much about the quality of the product, it's about the brand that you present. Now, Boise State has a great position where they've got a good quality product. I mean, we're not
Yes.
talking team that's going 8-5 every year, or barely making a bowl game. This is a team that's been consistently in bowl games. Is one of the winningest teams in the current era of college football in percentage-wise in college football. Period. Just second right now, I think, behind Ohio State, and they're going out there winning these big games. They're appearing on national scale. They're not just winning their conference. They're going out there winning against Power 5 top-level teams. They have a good actual body of work. But then you also add the fact that they have a great brand with the blue turf, with the exciting way that they play their football. Changes offensive coordinators, sure, but they continue to have that very exciting quarterback heavy with a good running game focused attack that's fun to watch regardless of who you are. They have a national brand, and that is why, despite their small regional area, despite being out in the northwestern corner of the U.S., stuck up there in Idaho, they've created a national following that rivals a lot of these Power 5 schools. And looking purely at how many TV sets are in a team's sphere of influence doesn't really dictate their future potential success.
Yeah, it really sucks, honestly. BYU's been behind the eight ball. Utah's been behind the eight ball because of our geography. There's not a lot of people in these places that the schools we love have existed. So it's hard scrabble, keeping yourself relevant in the national eye. But I think you're right. Boise State has earned that reputation, and nobody wants to go to Boise to play. I'll tell you that right now. David says Bronco predicted. Is he talking about you? Predicted
Yep.
Bush Hamden. So what does this mean exactly?
I did a video where I predicted the future offensive coordinators, and I listed all the offensive coordinators that I thought might come to Boise State. And I went,
okay.
I don't remember exactly how many, it was like 7 or 8 candidates that I thought Boise State might end up reaching out to. I'll say Bush Hamden wasn't the number one guy that I thought we were going to go after. I thought 2, we might go after our former offensive coordinator and bring him back over from the 2014 era, or we might go and grab Kirby Moore from Fresno State. But Bush Hamden was my number 3 guy that I was predicting Boise State might end up going after, and I brought up. So I think that's what he's talking about.
We're talking about for the future or for right now?
Right now, Boise State,
Okay.
they had didn't work out last season. Halfway through the year, Dirk Cutter, former head coach for us.
Dirk Cutter, yeah. Okay.
Had a crazy season. He basically, what happened is Dirk Cutter's son was on the team. He's wide receiver for Boise State, and last year. So for the last few years, Dirk Cutter had retired to Boise, and he was just coming to the games, coming to practices, hanging out on the sideline, hanging out in the stands. And so last year, the Boise State staff, which is, like I said, a very fresh young staff, said, "Hey, you're here anyway. We appreciate your perspective. Would you come and be an offensive analyst for us and just chip in?" And then about a third of the way through the year, Boise State loses to UTEP, which is just the most embarrassing loss in all of school history. And a lot of that was because the offense Tim Plow was trying to run. So Tim Plow gets fired. Hank Bachmeier transfers out. And they said, "Dirk, would you take over the reins?" And he said, "Okay, I'm not doing this for long run. I'm not doing any recruiting. I'm playing golf on Saturdays. I'm only doing this because of my son and his friends on the team." And they said, "Fine, come coach for us." And he took over the rest of the season as offensive coordinator. So at the end of the year, we needed one. They came. There was a big list of potential candidates that I went through and predicted. Bush Hamden is the guy that ended up taking out of Temple. And I'm excited about what he can bring to the team this year.
That's exciting. That's neat when you have fresh blood coming into your system. I think that's pretty cool. Carolina says Boston College is an embarrassment for the ACC. Wake Forest isn't much farther behind. He lives in Clemson. Nice to know that you're in Clemson, Carolina, because I'm going to be needing you to help me in future shows, because I really want to focus on where Clemson ends up, whether it's the SEC or the Big Ten. I'm not sure where that's going to be, but that's a different show. No one in traditional ACC territory has any respect for them. That's interesting. I wouldn't have known that. Did you know that, Bronco?
No, I mean, we've only played Boston College a handful of times, once in 2005, and then we were supposed to play them in a bowl game in Texas, and ended up getting canceled due to lightning. So, no, I don't have much familiarity with Boston College, but based on their record, I can understand that.
Agreed, unless you were Doug Flutie. Boise does have a brand, no doubt. This is from Charles. Yormark can work with that. If there's anybody that can work with a brand, it's Brett Yormark. Let's see here. A few more at the end. Carolina says Boise State is 3-0 in the Fiesta Bowl. That's a fantastic stat. And they've done that in a very short amount of time, 23, 24 years now, which is remarkable when you think about it. UCF is the next newest to be successful, and I think they do have a big upside where they're at.
Another great 3-0 stat I want to throw out because you mentioned them in the video is Oregon. Boise State is 3-0 all time versus Oregon. So just thought I'd throw it out.
I love that too. Well, you got to remember, I love that fist fight game, right? At the end of the game, when what's his name? Was that a Haloti Naga? I can't remember who it was, but
yeah, and he was on the Eagles for a while after
right.
That.
Yeah, that was not cool. That was a cold cock. It was not fair. Nick Saban was Alabama's third choice. Charles, what does that even mean? I have no context for that. Third choice when? Back like 10 years ago? What would that have been? About 15 years ago now. Yeah, you'll have to explain that one to me, Charles. Dave in Arizona says they beat Arizona in the last Fiesta Bowl. That's good to know. Boise State's on it. Both BC and Wake vastly improved their numbers in 2022. We'll have to see if they come to play this, because if you're not winning now, you're going to get left out. Relegation is around the corner, people. Consolidation and relegation is coming. The top 64, 66 brands in the country are going to consolidate, and they're going to be playing big boy football. Everybody else is going to be watching. So this would be a great year for Boise State to go undefeated, because eyeballs are all on every school right now. And the last comments will go, so much blue. Immaculate, where have you been? Oh my gosh, you joined me late, Immaculate. Thanks for joining the show. I appreciate it. It's good to see you. Everybody, we're going to let Bronco go. This has been a great time. I really appreciate your joining me today. And I'd love to be on your show whenever you do that, and if I can help at all. Otherwise, we'll have you on again, and we'll continue to get your opinions. We didn't talk a lot at San Diego State and realignment, but frankly, I think people are getting burned out on that anyway.
Well, hey, I had a great time. Thanks so much for having me on. You said it a couple times, but yeah, I would love any subscriptions to my Bronco Bleymaier YouTube channel. Just hit over 1,000. And today I hit over 1,000. So any additional subscriptions are always going to go a long way. Thank you so much for having me on. Definitely go and subscribe to this channel. It's been an amazing discussion. I've loved this so much. Definitely make sure you go and subscribe to Big 12 Mafia. Hit everything else that he mentioned, as well as Twitter and the subscription chats and everything as well. So thanks so much for having me on. It's been a great discussion. I'll end my part of this video as I do every video I do. Go Big Blue!
Thanks so much, Bronco. Appreciate it. And Immaculate relegation, that's a show for another time, but we will definitely have that conversation. I appreciate everybody being here. Please subscribe, give us the thumbs up, leave a comment or a suggestion. I take those all into place. And if you want to be part of the show and you don't want to be paying expensive super chats, just subscribe. My lowest tier, I believe, is $4 or $5.99, and all your comments will be read. Anyway, everybody have a great weekend. We've got the Holy Rivals is on tomorrow evening. Feel free to join us then. I believe we're going at 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. And everybody have a great Friday night. Peace.